Okay, very good. So, in this, the third essay, he's talking about the importance of Torah and mitzvos, and basically, naturally continuing the discussion of the concept of God as creator, the purpose of creation, the different spheres of creation, physical and spiritual, and then man being created at the pinnacle of the physical aspect of creation for the purpose of being the recipient of divine favor, divine goodness, and that's fully experienced when it is when it's deserved, when it's earned, and that's the purpose of free will. Free will is the venue through which people can receive the full good that God wants to give. Number one, by exercising that free will in order to do what God says, and number two, in doing what God says to become God-like, and thereby more akin to receiving the reward that is ultimately experienced by coming close to God. And he spoke about how there are then two paths before each person, right and wrong, impure or pure and impure, and free will is the ability to decide either one. The ramifications of choosing the light, the right, and impurity and purity will be happiness, joy, right, serenity, and the ramifications of choosing darkness, impurity, and wrong, of course, will be confusion, disquiet, and occlusion. And therefore, these are the two paths set before a person. The general structure through the way this works is mitzvos and averos. So that the light and purity and right is the direction of the mitzvos, or darkness and impurity and wrong is averos.
What about the gray?
What's that? There really is no gray area.
But
What would be the gray area?
is what we live in now. I mean, we don't know. Sometimes it's hard to tell.
I mean, it might be hard to tell, but there is either a mitzvah or an avera. I mean, there is no kilu, maybe avera, maybe mitzvah. I mean, it either we might not know, it might not be clear to us, right? So that's true. We might live in the gray area in terms of our perception. But to the extent to which a person is going in the path of the mitzvah, that would be towards light, and towards avera, that would be darkness. If he's confused, that doesn't mean that there is not one truth. He's just confused about where that is.
Right.
Yeah. So a person has to try his best. The Mesilas Yesharim addresses this point very thoroughly when he talks about how the way a person can know what the right path is by purifying himself. There's Zahirus and Zrizus. Zahirus is guarding oneself from transgression, right? Zrizus is proactively fulfilling the path of the mitzvot, and the key ingredient to either is to know the Torah. And if you don't know the Torah, then you have to consult the Chachamim, and he gives the famous analogy of the maze, whereby people are wandering around in the maze, fumbling their way through an area which is not clear, and the path to the goal is not distinct at all. But somebody who is on the pargod above and can see all the different paths, can tell and get instruction. This is the way. Go that way. Go right. Go left. Straight forward. Now go back. Right. And these are the rabbis or the sages throughout the generations who, through their own perfection, attain the goal, and from that vantage point, right, can give instructions to others how to get there. So that's why we have rabbanim for and tzaddikim. A person has to try his best to ascertain what's right and wrong, but it's always good to consult a rabbi, to consult a tzaddik, in order to try and get clarity. What should I do? That's Das Torah. Somebody made a point after the class yesterday, which is what we were talking about. Kind of reminded the person of acupuncture. Acupuncture. We were kind of discussing the possibility that what we were talking about is kind of like spiritual acupuncture, where and it is quite true that the Torah, that the mitzvos that we're talking about are actually connected to the spiritual realm. And as you know, there are 613 mitzvot, and the 613 mitzvot correspond to 365 transgressions, and 248 mitzvos, proactive mitzvos. So the 613 is broken down into 365 and 248. These 365 and 248 are viewed as corresponding to different parts of the actual body. The 248 positive commandments correspond to what's described in the Jewish sources as 248 limbs of the body. Modern anatomy might have a different breakdown, but Torah anatomy describes there being 248 parts of the body. And 365 corresponds to the sinews or the tendons or the connective tissues between the different parts of the body. So that in this way, the 613 mitzvot actually correspond to our bodily parts. The 248 do's to the body parts. 365 don'ts to the prohibitions. And it's not coincidental that the do's correspond to the instruments of the body that perform. Those are the limbs. And the restrictions, the prohibitions, correspond to the restrictive tissue. That's the tendon and the sinews and the like. And the reason for this is that you actually need the simultaneous action of both. Because if you just had a body, if you just had a part without a restrictive force acting on that part, so the part would just flimsy and flop and would not be able to do anything. So it's a very restrictive quality of the tendon which enables that body part, which it limits, to operate in a specific way. Even if it's a limited way, but the limitation actually enables it to operate. Without that limitation, it would not be able to operate at all. And therefore, there's a very holistic relationship between, on the one hand, the ability to do, and also the limiting of what is able to be done, so that a specific action, a specific result, can take place. And the same thing is true regarding the positive in the commandments. God says, be fruitful and multiply. But God limits how one should express that ability to be fruitful and multiply. Right? With what person, at what time, in what context, and so forth and so on. Otherwise, everything would be so fluid that it just will all just fall apart. And therefore, you need both the proactive and the restrictive elements working simultaneously. You can also think about this like in terms of a vessel. A vessel is used to contain, for example, something liquid or some other object. What enables that vessel to achieve that productive goal is that it has restrictive walls. If it didn't have restrictive walls, which define the space, the cavity of the vessel, then it certainly couldn't hold anything. Anything you would pour in it would all be seep out. So on the one hand, it's the restrictive walls which enable you to contain something at all. And when you therefore fill some liquid, for example, into that vessel, what happens is the restrictive walls actually enable what you're filling it with to rise. Right? The same thing here as well. The connection between the negative prohibitions and the positive commandments create the structure, the vessel, the keli, within which we pour our service of Hashem. And when one is operating with that context, within that infrastructure, the result will be elevation. If not, then the result is that everything that the person attains, any energy that he generates, is going to be wasted, dissipated, right, and spilled. So what?
I was saying, so what you're saying is that we can't reach the top of the vessel because we can't keep all 600.
Can't build it.
Yeah, we can't do it.
Yeah, so
at the moment.
Yes, that's true. We discussed how in a way we're limited, at least as individuals, to keep all 613. But we did mention there that's one of the reasons why the interconnectedness between Jews is so important. We say Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh L'Zeh. You have the klal. The klal is the general community of Jewish people, which is kolel, includes everybody, so that a Kohen can keep certain mitzvahs, yes, that others cannot, and others can keep certain mitzvahs that the Kohen may not. Men can keep things that women can't, and women what men can, so forth and so on. So that the collective body of the Jewish people is fulfilling all of the mitzvah, and it works vicariously, so that I actually do get connection to the mitzvah vis-a-vis my connection to another Jew who does have a connection to that mitzvah. That would be another explanation as to why mitzvah is called mitzvah as connector, where mitzvah is like the word tzvat, tzevet, together, a connector. So not only does it connect you to Hashem, it connects you to one another, right? And the interconnectedness of the Jewish people enable all people to become nitkan, become perfected through the mitzvah. Nowadays, we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, and many of the laws of Eretz Yisrael don't apply, even though we live in the land of Israel nowadays. Still, many of the mitzvahs don't apply, at least d'oraisa. So collectively, well, either as individuals or collectively, we're not able to fulfill those mitzvahs. B'ezrat Hashem, soon we will be able to. But in any case, to the extent to which we have the restrictions of the Torah, that creates the context or the vessel within which, once we pour the proactive action, that will enable us to grow and be elevated. Otherwise, it'll spill. The point here is that if the 613 divided into 365 and 248 is described as corresponding to our body parts, our bodies also correspond to the spiritual realm. And the spiritual realm with all of its parts is also described as being like the supernal man. So that just like human physiology has different parts, a head, arms, a torso, and legs, and so forth and so on, so the spiritual realm also has parts which are described as being the head. For example, the spheros of Keser, Chochmah, Bina, Das, and areas which are viewed as being like the shoulders, Chesed and Gevurah, or the torso, Tiferes. Then there's Netzach and Hod, the two legs, Yesod and Malchus, the productive channel which runs down through the person's body, emitting productive energy, which is then received and gestated and gives birth. So too, the spiritual realm is responsible for directing that energy into the receptacle of this world in order to generate, so forth and so on. Yeah. So that what this means is that when a person does a specific mitzvah, or he refrains from doing a specific avera, not only is he banishing impurity or infusing light into his own physiology, since all of the mitzvahs correspond to our body parts, and all of those body parts correspond to the supernal realm, what he's actually doing is causing purity to become banished from the spiritual realm, or for positive spirituality to become infused and illuminated there as well. And this is kind of an interesting idea that the person was making yesterday about, like, spiritual, what would you call it? Acupuncture. Yeah? So that mitzvah of tzedakah is actually touching some point, some juncture, some spiritual synapse in the metaphysical world, and causing a flow to come down, a flow of bounty and blessing, of purity. And this is what we were talking about yesterday. So that a massage therapist could probably tell you that there are points in the body, which maybe are more susceptible to tension or strain, whether it be physical or emotional. And if you know how to work those points, you can enable the tissue to soften and enable the flow of energy to come through those points, where the actual flow, the release of energy or the drawing down of energy flowing through that place itself will cause curing and healing. The pain and the suffering might arise very often because things are pinched, things are tight, there's a constriction, there's not a proper flow of blood or of energy. So the same thing in the spiritual realm as well. There are places which are susceptible to becoming pinched or contracted or constricted. And the result is that pain, suffering, agony, God forbid, can result. So the directed application of mitzvahs to those places can actually enable the flow of energy to go through them in a way where the flow itself will now repair what has been damaged. Yeah.
Can the opposite be said then for sin? Is a cause of those constrictions?
For sure. Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. That's exactly the point. Yeah, that's exactly the point. So this is a way of elaborating a bit on some of the points we touched on yesterday, which is how the positive things that we do in the form of mitzvos, or the negative energy we create in the form of averot, actually has far-reaching effects on the spiritual realm for good or for bad, which is then translated down into the physical world in general, and even to an individual for good or for bad. And it's all a result of our free will. Yeah.
I also wanted to ask another question that's Jewish spiritual energy. Does when you create good energy, does it attract good energy? And if you create negative energy, it'll also attract negative energy into your life?
Yeah.
Does it have that kind of attraction? Do we recognize that kind of pull?
Yeah.
If you do bad, more bad will happen.
Yes.
If you do good, more good will come.
Yes, I think so. And we succinctly said, Chazal say that a mitzvah gores mitzvah and a vera gores a vera.
Yeah.
Right? A mitzvah brings about brings into being more mitzvahs. That means a good deed really results in an accumulation of another good deed, and then another good deed, and another good deed. So it's actually accumulative in that respect. And the transgression, does the same thing. The negative energy results in an accruing of more negative energy, and more and more and more. And also we saw yesterday in this text itself the idea that there is what seems to be on the one hand light, and then the absence of light, which we call darkness. When a person banishes the light, the result is darkness. Darkness doesn't seem initially to be its own separate creation. It's just what results from an absence of light. Yet, the darkness that a person creates can then become an arena within which negative forces proliferate. So this would be exactly that type of a thing. If a person brings about darkness and negativity, what he's actually doing is creating the possibility for more negativity to come into being, which actually feeds on the darkness that results from the vanishing of the light. The introduction of the light is going to banish not only the inhabitants of that dark side, but ultimately dry up, right, the dark side entirely.
If I may, to include this week's Parsha with that kind of thing, say it was an accidental murder or death of an individual, that I guess would create dark energy accidentally. However, through one of the rabbis yesterday, saying that kind of accident will only happen if you've already facilitated a dark energy in your life, so that your axe handle is not going to come off unless you're negligent. And by being negligent, you've already started to create negative energy in your life. And therefore, that's why you had to go to a city of refuge.
Mm-hmm.
How does the energy, how do you think the reward and punishment of the energy relates to something along those lines of like this week's Parsha?
So, the extent to which a person is directly responsible, he's going to be directly culpable. And the degree of negativity that envelops such a person is also going to be a function of to what extent this person was intentionally negative. But even if it was unintentional, right? Number one, it's going to result in an increase of negativity. And what you're adding is that the fact that it was unintentional can also itself be a bringing into fruition of some smaller point of negativity that he did at an earlier time. So that, for example, there are comments of tzaddikim who say that if a Jew, God forbid, murders somewhere in the world, that's because some other Jew has used his hands improperly in another way, in a more subtle way, but did things which are considered to be tantamount to spilling blood. And a Jew who spills blood in a metaphysical type of a way can actually result in creating negative energy in the world, which as it ripples through the world, through the coarser and coarser levels, will actually be manifested in the actual taking of life, God forbid. So that when that handle, when that axe flies off the handle as an accident, it might very well be happening because this person himself has enveloped himself in some way with negative energy. And as a result, that type of thing had happened. But if that person was righteous and was in tune and was in harmony, right, there would be not just like divine protection, but there would actually be an energy, a positive energy around this person, which would actually prevent that type of thing from happening, right? So that accident happens because the person did some other accident. And that accident might come about because the person did some other accident. And it might start at a place which is very, very subtle. But as it's translated and kind of ripples through the world, it becomes more and more and more coarse until very, very significant results can occur. But it's very important, but still very hard to keep this in mind. But the truth is, if we really were palpably aware of how much of an effect we have on the world, not only in the things that we do, not only the things that we say, but even our thoughts have such a strong effect on the world. If we really, really were palpably aware of just how much effect we have, I think we would be much more careful about being positive and not negative. And more often than not, right, we're very good people, and we know that what we do is important, and we know that it has a great effect. And if we do introduce negativity into the world, it's because we have this temporary forgetfulness. We just stop thinking about how much of an effect this is really having. And that's like Chazal say, that a person doesn't sin unless he's invested with some spirit of folly. Normally, I could never do such a thing. If I do that, that could really have serious consequences. But when he comes all embroiled in the desire to do something, all of a sudden he forgets all about that and doesn't think. Yeah. But even the negative thoughts that we have can kill. And certainly the negative speech that we have can do great harm. And the acts that we do can have a great effect for bad. The truth is for good as well. Yeah. It's very difficult, but this would be, really, really internalizing how much this is true can really, really help a person safeguard against doing transgressions. The problem is, when he gets all embroiled in the desire to do that, he tends to forget. But if you could just stop, and say, wait a minute, no, I cannot do this. The results are just consequences are too great. And so often that can help deter us. Umnam hatova amitis on page 176. En ela dvekus bo yisborach. The true good is only through cleaving to God. May He be blessed. V'hine hamitzvos kfar be'arnu shem hamamshichim shefa kedushoso yisborach v'or tuvo. We've already explained that the mitzvahs are the venue through which the goodness of God draws down brocha, shefa, bounty, blessing from God and the light of His goodness. Alken, elehem emtsoim shal yadam tusag tova amitis, and therefore the mitzvahs are the vehicle through which a person can actually attain that great goodness. Kimisha hirbo liskadesh b'shefa kedushoso yisbrach, one who increases his holiness through the bounty, the flow of holiness from God, hu roi lidabek bo, such a person is befitting to cleave to God. Why? Because, like we said earlier, he has made himself God-like. He has removed the intervening layers between he and God. So just like when you glue two surfaces together, you have to remove debris between the two so that you have a proper adhesive force. So too here as well. When a person does the mitzvos, he removes the impurity from him. He makes himself God-like as possible by bringing upon himself the holiness of God. This actually enables the person to cleave to God. And to the great extent to which he's able to connect to God, the greater he's actually going to derive pleasure and benefit from God's goodness. But a person who has caused an increase of impurity upon himself, as we have explained, meaning through the performance, God forbid, of transgressions, he will simply not be fitting to cleave to God. Why? Because he's going to have all this spiritual debris, which acts as an interposition between he and God. So how could he cleave to God? How could he be glued to God if there's all that debris in between? It's going to prevent the surfaces from attaching one to the other. And he will be pressed away from him. In all of these matters, there are many levels. Ben b'shefa hagedusha, whether it is the flow of holiness, or the impurity that we've described. And so too, the goodness that comes about, that's acquired through the performance of good deeds. Or the distancing that one is distanced from the holiness, through the evil deeds. There's going to be many, many varying degrees of closeness and separation. And this is going to result in the difference between people in the true sense of the word, as we'll explain further on. So that's going to be the difference between people in this world and even more so in the next. So that, for example, in the world to come, it says the tzaddikim are going to be dwelling there, each with his own crown. We've discussed that a little bit. But each is going to be burned by the chuppah of his friend. Meaning every individual has his own is wedded in his own way to God. And the degree to which he is wedded to God is a function of his own particular combination of either closeness or distance from God. And each one has his own chuppah, his own wedding canopy, which is his own personal way of enjoying his place with God. But each is going to be burned by the canopy of the others because he's going to see, wow, look how close he is. Not that one tzaddik is going to be jealous of the other, in the sense that why, the Mesilas Yesharim explained this, why is he there and I'm not? Right? Rather, I'm happy that he's there. Why am I not also there? Yeah? And that's going to be a function of not having capitalized on the opportunities that were given to come close to God. So that's what a mitzvah is. When the Zohar says a mitzvah is an eitzah, it's God's giving you good advice about how to cleave to God. If after 120, people are not happy with where they are, it's only because they made their bed and now they sleep in it. Yeah, it's up to you. And it's true to a more extreme sense as well, which is that's all within Gan Eden. But there are people, their neshamas don't get to Gan Eden initially. They go to Gehinnom. Gehinnom is not a pleasant experience at all. But a person has nobody to blame but himself. What are you complaining about? I gave you the great advice. I told you, you have A and B. Choose A. Choose life. You chose B. You chose death. Now you're complaining? You didn't follow the instructions. You didn't take the good advice. That such a soul should be eliminated. But in God's great mercy, He created hell, Gehinnom. That's part of the chesed of Hashem. Despite the fact that I gave you advice, I gave you instructions, I told you very clearly, choose A, and you rebelled and chose B, I still love you. I'm still giving you an opportunity to join everybody else, all the tzaddikim over there, each one with all chuppah. Problem is, to get there, you have to be cleansed of the impurities that you accrued upon yourself. So unfortunately, that cleansing process is not particularly pleasant. Yeah?
What is the process like? What does the Gemara say about the process of Gehinnom? Or what is?
So there are many different teachings about Gehinnom, and we can't go through all of them now, right? But the different sources describe a scenario where there's Gan Eden and Gehinnom. Both Gan Eden and Gehinnom each have an upper and lower chamber. There's upper Gan Eden, lower Gan Eden, upper Gehinnom, lower Gehinnom. Each chamber has 7 rooms or levels, each one with its own name and responsible for its own thing. So there's 14 in total in Gan Eden and 14 in Gehinnom. There's a river called the River Denur, the River of Fire, which is at the entrance to Gehinnom. And the neshamas which go into Gan Eden take a little dip in that river on their way in. It's kind of like going into a nice hot mikveh before Shabbos. But those souls who have a lot of debris end up not enjoying the dip in that river particularly, and it's just a preparation for to loosen up the debris in order for it to be properly cleansed in Gehinnom. Now, a person goes through the different levels of Gehinnom according to the debris that he's accrued, and that's a function of the transgressions that he does. It's enough for one person to go into one chamber, right, one level of Gehinnom Elyon, or of even Gehinnom Tachton. Another person might have to go through several, or even all of the levels, one after the other, where the purpose, of course, is not to punish the person, but it's to cleanse the neshama, so that it can ultimately get to the Gan Eden, that was destined for it initially, if the person had made the right decision. And this river Denur, this river of fire, is described as being formulated from the sweat of the angels as they serve Hashem with great fervor, which means that the angels which single-heartedly serve Hashem with no Yetzer Hara, but with one heart, in a devoted fashion, they serve God with such fervor that creates this energy which the righteous can temper and tolerate, because they were also, by and large, serving Hashem in a single-hearted, dedicated way, like the fervor of the angels when they serve God. And therefore, their experience in this river is something which is actually pleasant for them, because they have prepared a type of spiritual vessel which is in tune with the service of God like those of the angels. But the wicked are not. And since they did not serve Hashem, or if they did so with a multitude of different intentions, or they might not have served Hashem at all, and they served multiplicity in all of its different forms, idolatry, sexual immorality, theft, and all of these things. So these people are burned by the river of the sweat of the angels that serve Hashem with single-heartedness. And
shame. I mean, it's a metaphor.
It's like, yes, it's not
this process of, so they're ashamed, they feel ashamed, so they distance themselves. And the others are.
Yes, but it's more than just ashamed. I mean, it's more than just ashamed. They actually suffer from being out of current with this river, right? People who live their lives, more or less in the flow of holiness, they can kind of connect to the flow, as it were, of this river, and it directs them to the right place. But those who have to get across it and go against its current suffer very much. They can't go with it because they didn't live their life that way. So now they're really having to suffer the brunt of having gone against the current of serving Hashem in the spiritual realm, and the experience is very unpleasant, as is the experience in each of the different levels of Gehinnom. But again, the purpose is not punitive in terms of punishment; it's puritative in terms of purifying the soul. It's like when a person plays rugby or plays American football, not European football, because that's soccer. You don't get very dirty. But if you play American football or rugby, you get all dirty, right? But if you want to make right, but if you want to make it to the playoffs, you certainly have to wash your jersey before you get there, right? So you throw that jersey into the washing machine and it tumbles around and around. And I wouldn't want to be that jersey, but you need to clean it in order to get to the playoffs, right? So that's what happens here. A person runs around and rolls around in the dirt of this world. He gets his jersey all dirty, and before he can get to the finals, he's got to wash it up. And washing it up is not a pleasant experience. But it's not the pain which is the purpose. It's the cleansing of it.
It's like boot camp for the soul.
Boot camp for the soul. Yeah. So those people who made this world boot camp, they're already sergeants and lieutenants and even generals in the world to come. But those who made this world a playground, once they get there, you're in the army now. It's a boot camp. You didn't go through basic training there, so you're going to have to do it here. Better to do it here than there. What were we going to say?
I was going to ask a question, but it might be better suited for the essay on Paradise and Gehenna.
Okay, fine. Fair enough. So let's go for a bit further here. V'tzarech sheteda, and it's important that we know, shekmo shenotan la'adam shehiyeh mamshich la'atzmoi kedush o zuhuma, just as it is possible for a person to bring holiness or impurity upon himself, ken nitan lo shebekoch ma'asav yamshich b'chol habriya kula hagedusha hazuma, that the same thing applies for all of creation, that we are given the ability to bring purity or impurity not only upon ourselves but into the entire creation. And the result is that all of creation is either corrected or derailed as a result of what people do. And he's touching upon these very far-reaching consequences that we spoke about earlier, and the great responsibility that we have. And this will be considered as a reward or as merit for the righteous, that they're actually benefiting the entire world. And as an obligation on behalf of the Rishoim, who destroy the world, as we explained, within So people say, what do those religious people contribute to the world? Those good-for-nothing, lazy bums living off everybody? When in truth, in many ways, it's the exact opposite. It's those who are indulging in the bounty of this world who are actually living off the blessing that's brought into the world on behalf of the tzaddikim. Like the Gemara says regarding Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, that Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, a great Jewish sage of the Talmud, he lived off a very simple diet all week long. He had a small amount of carobs on Fridays, on Shabbos. That's all he ate. But in his merit, his holiness, and his sanctity, and his righteousness, the entire world was sustained. So everybody was having a jolly old time on his account. But they might point a finger at him and say, who's that recluse? What is that Torah scholar all about? He's not involved in the world, he's not interested in the world, he doesn't contribute in the world, he doesn't do anything productive, he doesn't contribute in any way. You don't realize exactly the opposite. They're living off the fruits of the labor of the righteous. And pointing a finger at the righteous don't do anything, they don't contribute.
Dilemma now.
What's that?
That's the dilemma.
That's the dilemma.
In Israel.
Yeah, and all over. It's true, even in Israel. The truth is, an observant person has to show empathy for the world and for what other people do. And so, for example, if there are people who work or people who serve in the army and do all these types of things, and a religious person finds he's not doing that because he is presently dedicated to full-time study, there's no reason why he shouldn't say to the soldier, for example, good job, thanks very much, may God protect you and guard you. Yeah? No reason why you shouldn't.
When they
Yeah?
had the protests against the army, if they came together, all of them, and then would have prayed for the people in the army, you could have changed the whole, I don't know.
Yeah, it could have changed things in there. But even at that time, many people were trying to communicate.
Against it,
Yeah.
So, you know what? We'll still pray for you, like you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. So there were people who were trying to communicate that idea, but it's true. That's why I'm saying, it kind of goes both ways, right? The religious community might also sometimes retract into its own self-defensiveness and convey the wrong message. It's a difficult, that's like a gray area that you're talking about. It's kind of not always easy to know exactly who should say what, when, and to whom. But at least generally we should be aware that, yes, while Torah learning is of utmost importance, and we have to be convinced of the great way in which it benefits the world, we should still feel, and even when it's appropriate, demonstrate appreciation for those who are contributing to the world in another way, in the physical, mundane way. And that means even saying thank you to the garbage man.
Yep.
If there was no garbage man, who would be taking out the garbage? There would be garbage everywhere. You couldn't learn Torah because it would be stinking everywhere. Yeah. So there's no reason why a person who is rushing to shul, having the most spiritually elevated ideas in mind, and he's about to connect to the creator of the universe, shouldn't simultaneously say thanks to the garbage man as he's picking up the pans and throwing them into the truck. Yeah? That's also part of making a yichud, a unification between the different forces in the world. In any case, the chov the rashoim shemekalkelin osam k'mo shezacharnu lefnim. Umnam haderech shebo mamshichim maaseh ha'adam es ha'ashpos ha'ele hu b'choach ha'kbola shezacharnu lamala. The way in which we can bring about these influences in the world is through the force of ha'kbola shezacharnu lamala. Anybody have the English here?
The manner in which man's deeds transmit these influences is through the above-mentioned power of parallelism, yeah. That exists between the entities below. Okay, so the hakbala, the correlation, ben hanimtsoim hashufalim, those creations which are in the physical mundane world, uben akochas elyonim, and the forces which are on high in the spiritual world. Ad shekasher yisna'a echad min hanimtsoim lemata, hini yagia hisarus halakoach hamakbilo lamala. So that when a person operates in some way below in the physical realm, he's actually causing a corresponding place in the spiritual realm to be stirred in accordance with what he's done. Then through this force that he has set into motion, Tesovav hatoloda shetesovev bahamshocha ahashpos, and this will bring about the bringing down then of these influences, whether for good or for bad. Kihine imamaseahu ye mecheleka mitzuvim. If that act is going to be associated with one of the commandments, Yisora koyach she'alav v'yischazek, the force which is above that mitzvah will become strengthened. Val yado timashech hashpah shel kedusha mimenu yisbarach kefi inyan hayisorus shenisora. The result then will be a letting loose, a flow of holiness from its source on high to a degree which is relevant to the act that was done. And it's not only an act, by the way. If a person is performing a mitzvah in the realm of speech or a mitzvah in the realm of thought, those actions or those words or those thoughts are connected to the spiritual realm, the corresponding place that we've mentioned, the 613, 248, and 365 respectively. So even a thought, the quality of that thought is going to have a commensurate degree of effect. So if a person, for example, is contemplating on his love of God or his thoughts of understanding God, and those thoughts are very, very, very thorough, very deep, very intense, so that's going to set into motion a flow of energy which is commensurate to the degree of the mitzvah. And that's also true regarding the speech and also the deed. But if this act, or for example, speech or thought, is among the things which are to be avoided, then it will cause harm and deficiency in the powers on high, in accordance to that particular bad deed or speech or thought. The result will be that the light of God will disappear and become distanced. And then there will be catalyzed into being one of the negative forces in that darkness which he has created. That's what we were talking about before, right? The transgression banishing the light, the darkness then becoming a place where negative forces can proliferate, and therefore he has caused all of this to come about. And this will be, right, converse to the degree of holiness which he has caused to depart. There will then flow from this banishing of the light that he's created a flow of impurity, according to the stirring up that he has stirred up. However, in the same way, through tshuva, a person can remove this impurity, this harm, this deficiency, and he will then eliminate and negate the power of tuma to do its harm. And then he will cause the flow of holiness to come back into its proper place and flow as it is intended. Right? So he's saying here then that everything that we've said is applicable not only on a personal level but on a general level as well, both for good or for bad, either to bring in light and holiness or darkness and purity. But there's always a way of rectifying even the impure things that we've done by doing tshuva. And tshuva will then hack away at the forces of impurity that we ourselves have created, sending them out in order to and banish them, which will enable the light to come back and be restored to its place and return the world to the equilibrium that we should not have disturbed in the first place, but we can regain through the power of tshuva. So tshuva is a very important part of all of this as well. Okay, let's stop here. Let's continue next time we meet tomorrow.